This is LaRouche PAC's weekly Saturday night class series. Today is given by My-Hoa Steger, LaRouche PAC, Michigan. And it's the first of a two-part series on Beethoven. And just to say a few words in introduction, I mean, I'm sure many of you watched President Trump's CNN town hall in New Hampshire this week. And if you did, I'm sure you noticed how much fun he was having. And that's the point of this class. I mean, this is something Lyndon LaRouche always said. He ended so many of his speeches and discussions with the injunction to have fun, as President Trump was doing there in New Hampshire at the expense of CNN, among others. And this is just the kind of thing that Beethoven did. Beethoven had a hell of a lot of fun. And I see many people have joined this class that you're eager to find out. So with that, let me just hand it over to My-Hoa Steger.
Okay. This is the go?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is My-Hoa. I am going to move swiftly through what is becoming more and more relevant and more fun and more necessary these days, which is the ideas of Beethoven. As you saw in the email, in particular, Beethoven's Opus 111, his last piano sonata. And honestly, I am you're really joining me to, in my mind, to investigate the glory of God through Beethoven, because there's so many discussions about what lies are being told in society. Everybody knows the lies that are being told, left and right. No pun intended. Although, where are the truths? What are the truths, the historical truths that identify the arc of human civilization? Because essentially, this is what's under attack. And this is why we have so much fun at LaRouche PAC, why President Trump is having so much fun, why telling the truth is so much fun. Because when you do that, you're participating in an arc of the development of civilization. Because we couldn't have come this far without the discovery and transmission and communication of these beautiful truths. And we're not discussing the question of an absolute truth, but we're investigating metaphors into a living universe, into the living creator, of which we're a part, of which we are made in the living image of. So I am more than ecstatic to be able to do this with you tonight and also next week. As I said, we are going to move quickly. This doesn't require any, anybody's musical abilities to be professional or whatnot. The real question is the human mind, and that's what we're investigating, the question of the creative human mind in the living image of God through, in this case, in particular, Beethoven, which is, I mean, this is, if you really think about Beethoven having lived 200 plus years ago, it's not really just his compositions that are popular. He's not a popular individual, but he's part of the thread and fabric of the soul of humanity, having made breakthroughs that really shaped the course of human civilization. And as I said in the email, in the blurb, people to this day are emboldened by and uplifted by this kind of music, not because it's popular, but because it's substantial, because it's profound, and it's because it's a part of our development as a civilization. And more, like I said at the beginning, that's under attack. The question that we are a part of a living human civilization. Many in society want to compartmentalize groups of people and divide them up and isolate them from each other. But this is a moment where we have the opportunity, we have the wherewithal, we have the courage to investigate something that makes us truly beautiful and truly human. So that is essentially the definition of having fun. And that's what we're going to do tonight. So I just want to begin. So Beethoven, many people are familiar with Beethoven. You've probably heard many of his compositions. Mr. LaRouche really underscored and emphasized the compositions, not just the compositions of Beethoven, but the fact that his identity as a historic individual. And if you want to really understand and discover the creative capacity of Beethoven, you really want to consider him as one of the greatest scientific minds ever known to man. And by scientific, that essentially implies knowable. It is something knowable. It's not magical. It's not as if you're going to pick something apart, but I would emphasize, were we to actually have a curriculum in society to develop the younger generations, which is what we intend to do. I know in the history of our organization, we've wanted to set up institutions of education. We've had camps before, which brought people together to really study these ideas in an intensive way. But really, it's the question of reliving a discovery and identifying as a human being at this moment in time, but able to rediscover an idea and a breakthrough that was made hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. So in terms of scientific minds, that is the mind of Beethoven. You can get at it. It's very accessible. I think people know the elitist globalists want to kind of separate the ideas of Beethoven and the accessibility of Beethoven from the general population, maybe from the working class, from what they would consider the lower classes. And those are the kind of boundaries that we are about to bust through with a massive amount of dynamite and power. So within the identity of Beethoven, which is something we are defending to this day, not just his music, but his identity as an individual, what he was devoted to. If you have the opportunity, like I said, the curriculum for this kind of study would be that you would study Beethoven's compositions from the early period through the middle period through the late period, and really get an insight into his own self-development and the process of his own fundamental breakthroughs within the course of his life. And this is something Mr. LaRouche has written volumes on, which we've studied at many different times, but it's very important today. And as I said, that Beethoven is political. His music is the political literature of a Promethean humanism. And that's probably the highest sense of identity that anybody can have. And if you're able to gain an insight into Beethoven's self-development, you have an image of something grand and lofty for yourself in terms of your own self-development, because that's fundamentally what we need. We need people to really search inside themselves, to have the courage to stand on these truths amidst all kinds of attacks. And because they are going to come, as we've seen on the political stage, on the world stage, you are going to be attacked until they try to get you to really disassociate from this arc of history. So we're not going to let them do that. I'm going to jump into the composition, into this piece in particular. And as we go along, we will continue to, if you have just questions or comments, I would ask you to jot them down. We will have a question and answer period. We are going to move through a lot of material. And like I said, don't worry if you don't have a musical background. If you have a mind, if you concentrate, if you think and listen into what I demonstrate and what you hear, you will gain something. And like I said, it's not going to be an easy pathway just, after this discussion and presentation. Oh, I know Beethoven's Opus 111. I'm still in the process of discovery. We're going through this process of investigation and discovery together. And that's what makes this fun, is because we're all moving toward an intention of something similar to Beethoven, because you can't really disassociate Beethoven from what his devotion was, which to me was truly the idea that God's will be done. Beethoven lived up to that. If you read his letters, if you read his statements, obviously, if you listen to his compositions in music, if you work on them, you know that this is his devotion. It's a devotion to a higher good. And it's a devotion to something that's eternal and not just a fad, not just something that's gonna be a chimera in society at the moment, but something that is everlasting, which is why to this day, in May of 2023, hundreds of years later, we are still learning. We're becoming more emboldened and fortified by participating in these kinds of discussions. So that really is my initial comments. This is part of a two-part series. What I'm going to take up in this particular portion is the first movement of Beethoven's Opus 111. It is a two-movement work. Beethoven composed 32 piano sonatas. This is the very last one, composed between 1820 and 1822. It's in the key of C minor. C minor is a very popular and it seems like a very important key that Beethoven composed in. You might know some compositions such as, I play that. A lot of people know. If you don't know what that is the beginning of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. It is in the key of C minor. There's also Beethoven's Piano Concerto number 3. Sorry. That's also very popular. You have other compositions which I also will get into. But the question of a key of C minor, the key of something, this is something that Beethoven was inspired by in terms of a tonality, a poetic tonality to communicate the idea that he had. So it is a bounded domain, although yet it's unbounded because you still have access to all other tonalities. But depending in the hands of Beethoven, it unfolds in a lawful way. And that was a great devotion of Beethoven, because within the process of his own musical self-development, he knew that these compositions and the universe, I mean, music is really, he treated it as a lawful domain of human practice. And that is what we're going to hear, because it doesn't get in, you never get a sense of arbitrariness. You never get a sense of true existentialism where you don't know where this is going. You kind of like dropped in the abyss. But there always is a developing sense of coherence. So I'd like to jump in. One thing that I know I'd like to take time to read. I timed it myself. It's something extremely important. I did email Tony. Did you put that in the chat, Tony? The link?
No, okay, I will.
Could you do that, please?
Yeah,
Okay, so we're going to put into the chat a link to a statement that Beethoven wrote in 1802. When he was 32 years old. He was born in 1770. So he wrote this at the age of 32. It is called the Heiligenstadt Testament. And it's something that was truly a defining orientation for Beethoven, something that was obviously that shaped his identity. And I think shaped his relationship to God and his question of the fact that he wasn't satisfied until he had a sense that his God's will be done through him. And it will give you an insight into how powerful Beethoven was, what he fought through, what he endured, what his challenges were, and the fact that we're part of that. We have our own challenges at this moment in history, because our road to salvation and our road to a complete revolution and transformation is not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of work on each and every one of our parts. But as one of my close friends here says, if you put your faith in God, God will mount guard over your heart, and he will carry you through. But it is a 50-50 relationship. You have to have the devotion, you have to fight for it. And the question of fighting for it, the idea of truth and standing on that is fundamental. So I'd like to read this because it's just instrumental. It's a foundation of Beethoven's identity. So if it's in the chat, you can click on the link.
I haven't put it there yet, but it will be.
Oh, could you put it there now?
Well, I'm working on it. It'll come up in a while.
Okay. Let me know when it's there.
Oh, you want it there before you begin? Okay.
Yeah, so people have it and they can click on the link.
Okay. Just a minute.
Otherwise, I can start and.
I would suggest, why don't you start and I'll have it up there.
Okay.
I'll have it up there shortly.
Okay, well, he'll put the link up there, but so please listen in. So he wrote this in 1802 to his brothers. As I said, he's 32 years old. And he says, for my brothers, Carl and Johann, let me just preface this by saying that I'm under the assumption that most people know that Beethoven was deaf and had a massive challenge most of his adult life in being able to hear. And this will give you a sense. This is, like I said, this is when he's 32, and we can discuss it a bit more, but this is the context. So for my brothers, Carl and Johann, oh, you men who think or say that I am malevolent, stubborn, or misanthropic, how greatly do you wrong me? You do not know the secret cause which makes me seem that way to you. From childhood on, my heart and soul have been full of the tender feeling of goodwill, and I was ever inclined to accomplish great things. But think that for 6 years now, I have been hopelessly afflicted, made worse by senseless physicians, from year to year, deceived with hopes of improvement, finally compelled to face the prospect of a lasting malady, whose cure will take years or perhaps be impossible. Though born with a fiery, active temperament, even susceptible to the diversions of society, I was soon compelled to withdraw myself, to live life alone. If at times I tried to forget all this, Oh, how harshly was I flung back by the doubly sad experience of my bad hearing. Yet it was impossible for me to say to people, "Speak louder, shout, for I am deaf." Oh, how could I possibly admit an infirmity in the one sense which ought to be more perfect in me than in others, a sense which I once possessed in the highest perfection, a perfection such as few in my profession enjoy or ever have enjoyed. Oh, I cannot do it. Therefore, forgive me when you see me draw back, when I would have gladly mingled with you. My misfortune is doubly painful to me because I am bound to be misunderstood. For me, there can be no relaxation with my fellow men, no refined conversations, no mutual exchange of ideas. I must live almost alone, like one who has been banished. I can mix with society only as much as true necessity demands. If I approach near to people, a hot terror seizes upon me, and I fear being exposed to the danger that my condition might be noticed. Thus it has been during the last 6 months, which I have spent in the country. By ordering me to spare my hearing as much as possible, my intelligent doctor almost fell in with my own present frame of mind, though sometimes I ran counter to it by yielding to my desire for companionship. But what a humiliation for me when someone standing next to me heard a flute in the distance and I heard nothing, or someone heard a shepherd singing and again I heard nothing. Such incidents drove me almost to despair. A little more of that and I would have ended my life. It was only my art that held me back. It seemed to me impossible to leave the world until I had brought forth all that I felt was within me. So I endured this wretched existence, truly wretched for so susceptible a body which can be thrown by a sudden change from the best condition to the very worst. Patience, they say, is what I must now choose for my guide, and I have done so. I hope my determination will remain firm to endure until it pleases the inexorable Parcai to break the thread. Perhaps I shall get better, perhaps not. I am ready. Forced to become a philosopher already in my 28th year, oh, it is not easy, and for the artist much more difficult than for anyone else. Divine One, thou seest my inmost soul. Thou knowest that therein dwells the love of mankind and the desire to do good. O fellow men, when at some point you read this, consider then that you have done me an injustice. Someone who has had misfortune may console himself to find a similar case to his, who despite all the limitations of nature, nevertheless did everything within his powers to become accepted among worthy artists and men. You, my brothers, Carl and Johann, as soon as I am dead, if Dr. Schmidt is still alive, ask him in my name to describe my malady and attach this written document to his account of my illness so that so far as is possible, at least the world may become reconciled to me after my death. At the same time, I declare you two to be the heirs to my small fortune, if so it can be called. Divided fairly, bear with and help each other. What injury you have done me, you know was long ago forgiven. To you, Brother Carl, I give special thanks for the attachment you have shown me of late. It is my wish that you may have a better and freer life than I have had. Recommend virtue to your children. It alone, not money, can make them happy. I speak from experience. This was what upheld me in time of misery. Thanks to it and to my art, I did not end my life by suicide. Farewell and love each other. I thank all my friends, particularly Prince Lichnowsky and Professor Schmidt. I would like the instruments from Prince L to be preserved by one of you, but not to be the cause of strife between you. And as soon as they can serve you a better purpose, then sell them. How happy I shall be if I can still be helpful to you in my grave. So be it. With joy, I hasten to meet death. If it comes before I have had the chance to develop all my artistic capacities, It will still be coming too soon, despite my harsh fate, and I should probably wish it later. Yet even so, I should be happy, for would it not free me from a state of endless suffering? Come when thou wilt, I shall meet thee bravely. Farewell, and do not wholly forget me when I am dead. I deserve this from you, for during my lifetime, I was thinking of you often and of ways to make you happy. Please be so. That is a glimpse into one of the greatest scientific minds in all of history, which we are about to explore and investigate. And my hopes are that we provoke people into wanting more and more of this incredible person that can soon become our guide in the days to come. So let me just begin. As I said at the beginning, this is Beethoven's final piano sonata. And I just wanted to share maybe some small discoveries that I maybe made in terms of my own investigation, thinking about, well, what inspired Beethoven in terms of his compositional strategy in 111. Because the last three piano sonatas really are considered a one. I have given presentations before on 110. Maybe someday we'll take all three of them up together as one package. But for right now, we're going for the gold here. And so this is in C minor. And like I said at the beginning, we heard, glimpses of different C minor compositions, which is Beethoven's Fifth or the piano concerto. Maybe something people are also familiar with is the Pathetique Sonata, also in C minor. So when you hear this, your mind is attuning to what this thing called C minor is. So let's see. That's the Pathetique Sonata. You might have heard it before. It's quite famous, Opus 13. But keep these as much as possible as accessible in your mind to refer back to, because you'll see the relevance as I get into the 111, the composition of the 111. So something that I also discovered because most of my days involve playing Bach, a lot of Bach, and most of Beethoven's days, when he was a young child, from the age of 9, 10, definitely 11, he was introduced to Bach by an organist in Bonn, and it was really before Bach was readily available for the population. He somehow got manuscripts of Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier and played them religiously and very well. And it really became a part of his identity. And when you get into investigating other profound composers, you really will see the relationship and the impact that Bach had on those composers, which will probably become your favorite composers. So I was playing Bach, and I realized that the partita number 2 is also in C minor. And as I was working on 111, Opus 111, I realized a relationship there, which I don't know is official or not, but you'll see the relevance. So this is the beginning of the partita. So you see a relationship there. I'm going to play the beginning of Opus 111 in C minor. So the beginning of that, you get this, it's obviously very jarring and it's very dramatic. He makes these a very profound but yet unresolved statements at the beginning. It's almost as if it's an improvisation. But if you hear the relationship of what I played at the beginning, you hear that dotted rhythm, similar to the Bach. Oops. So it has the beginning of the 111. So at the beginning, so you probably hear these dotted exclamations. The Pathetique sonata is an earlier sonata, so it's something that Beethoven worked over a period of time on. But let's get into 111 in particular, and we'll stay there. If people have questions about the other compositions, we can get back to it later in the question and answer. But there's a lot of material to go through here. So in the beginning, what I just played, Beethoven makes basically 3 declarations, 3 exclamations. And I'll play them again for you, just so you hear it. So within that, you get this sense of unresolved. Beethoven uses a compositional motif called a diminished seventh, which is essentially what that means. It's unresolved. It's moving toward a resolution. The beginning is like an improvisation, but you know, it's an opening to a very weighty drama. And you get these three statements that continue to rumble. And then you have a moment where he gets to a certain plateau where you have the ability to regain your breath, which we will get to right here in a minute. But I just wanted to give you a sense of that opening and how we're going to travel through it. So I will continue with the third statement moving on. That is one of the plateaus that I mentioned, where he takes you along this journey and he gives you a breath because he's preparing for what's coming. And in this case, this is in G, which is the dominant of C. So it's all interrelated, but he gets to a different part of the tonality, and he rests there for some time before he gets to the opening exposition. So that is, you're finally getting into the development. So a development in the tonality of C minor, where you had this rumbling. It's almost like a timpani. So Beethoven is very particular. Obviously, he's his own person. He's the only composer that makes use of these sforzandi, which are very typical of Beethoven. It's a part of his identity. It's what he wants. It's something that's unique to his compositional method. If you don't know what sforzandi, it's a burst of sound. It's a burst of energy. And it's not, it's meant to be there, like what you heard here. So he means those pulses. And I know from music school, like musicians that aren't really true to Beethoven, they try to mask it over, they try to make it a little nicer and try to package it for you. But that wouldn't be Beethoven. That wouldn't be Beethoven's power. So it grows into this. And where I just stopped, let me pick it up and we'll get into what he does in this next part. Beethoven has two different compositional contrapuntal ideas going on at the same time. You hear what he introduced at the beginning, right? Right at the beginning, where you have this, that's in unison. But now he's developing two simultaneous, different but related ideas, counterpoint. So on the one hand, you have this idea, but it's also, you've got these running, this running motif underneath it. And it goes back and forth. And then it goes back. And it goes back and forth. So he's playing around with this, and throughout the course of these kinds of developments, this is what's unique about participating in something like this, which is your mind. It's not as if your mind is retaining everything, but your mind has a capacity to engage and from beginning to end, participate in the unfolding of an idea, which is coherent, stays as a one. It's obvious. You have to be in the hands of a good musician, of somebody that has a devotion to God, and all, well, actually I was thinking Beethoven, but I said God, but I think it's one and the same at this point. But has a devotion to the creator, has all of these in one as a whole, as a one. And your mind is able to, in a sense, comprehend the transformation upon transformation that occurs. And it only occurs in the human mind. There's no other species that has the ability or was given the ability to do what we're doing. So we should really take that to heart and not take it for granted, because this should be done much more in society, this kind of fun, this kind of investigation. This is what mankind will continue to build from. So with that being said, so you have the back and forth. He hands it off. You have two interweaving motifs in terms of counterpoint. well, that's a little different. He brings something, it's a very brief moment of a truly just lyrical moment, where you don't feel like, oh my, where is he going? What's next? What's coming? This intensification. It was pretty intense, and you get the expanse of the depths of the lower registers and the heights of the higher register. And later on in the first movement, I'll make a different point about that, I think. But as you can tell, he arrives at this moment after, let me see. That 2 measures gives you a breath. You're able to really, it's just a living organism that's being developed in your mind. And so this is an oasis, in a sense, in this kind of dramatic composition. And he continues to play around. Not for long. And then he repeats the entire first part of the sonata again, which we won't do right now. But his intention was for you to go back and repeat that entire section that you just heard. So a few words on this. After the oasis, he jumps right back into the drama. Oops, sorry. And here I hear an orchestra. I hear the woodwind. And then I haven't figured out what these are yet. I feel like there's strings passing off. Oops. One moment, please. Just give me 1 second. Okay, sorry. Okay, so just getting warmed up here. Where was I?
Orchestra.
Oh yes, the orchestra. So we have he's intending that these sforzati. So to some people they consider that unmusical, but it's Beethoven, so it is music. It's music. So you hear that orchestra, it's very fun. It's Beethoven's playful identity, just what he hears in his imagination, and clearly this is when he's deaf. So you really have to think through that, and work yourself through what that means, because it's so you can't solve that paradox. It's something that you have to think through. So that is the first exposition. So I'll just again get to this. We'll get to the second part. And then this, it's a very intensely quiet, sort of sneaky, sneaky situation. But he ends up in this portion where he has three themes going at the same time. What you heard was, which is somewhat similar to the beginning, and then he hands it off to the lower voice. Back to the higher voice. So it's a fugue-like fugato. It's a mini fugato, but you have the same the same motif passed off in three different voices. So we'll hear that and where it goes. Familiar? It's familiar, it's the same, but it's different. And what happens, this is a pretty remarkable part of the development, when he has this secretive. Where are we? So now it comes back in a quadruple octave form. All you heard at the beginning is a singular voice. But now it is in quadruple octaves. what I just played for you, this sort of truncated, that is what in the very beginning. And I also forgot to mention that the opening, let me just go back to that for a quick second, and play those three exclamations, those three statements. Within that three statements, what you hear, right? You hear that diminished quality, unresolved. You hear all those three. Those are essentially, that is the musical universe of the 12 tones, the current system, the system that Beethoven explored, the system that Bach, not the 12 tone system per se, but the tonalities of the 12 tones that you hear at the very beginning. So he's explored almost the entire musical universe through all this. He comes back to it at what I just played for you, this truncated. You heard that at the beginning. So we've heard this, the re-emphasis of the beginning. To what he played with before, but now in an octave form rather than a singular tone. Octave meaning a double. You hear the two tones, two of the same tones at the same time, simultaneously. And he goes back and forth. Again, we're in this double motif acting at the same time. Again, but you hear something similar. You've heard this before, but I feel like this, it's more powerful because of all the transformations and the development that you've gone through, but also Beethoven has subtle changes in terms of bringing in the octaves and making them more emphatic, more dramatic. So that's pretty much what you heard is that subtle difference where you don't have just the singular motif going, but also he explores this higher registration. Oh, sorry. There's that oasis again. But he comes at it, to me, the metaphor for this it's like the abyss and the heavens. And in his own mind, he is resolving this question of death. Beethoven is an example of the triumph over death. That he clearly, as you heard in his in the Heiligenstadt Testament, he wasn't afraid of it. He became not afraid of it. He organized himself to realize, well, his life was devoted to truth, and however long his life was going to be, that was going to be God's will, and so he was resolved on that. But these kinds of moments make you think. Sorry. Certain resolution. Oh, okay. We'll be ready for questions and answers soon. So, what was I thinking about this? Oh, yes, okay. So, you have, moments when he brings the whole orchestra together, and he's just you can just imagine the instruments in the symphony and the orchestra. Like I said, I haven't figured out exactly what instruments are where or what, but I know it's a symphonic, and I have a sense of where the woodwinds are. But I think it is the strings going back and forth. and it gets to this moment. That's how the first movement ends. Next week is the second movement, which you're gonna have to hold on to your hat for that one because it's a doozy. The first movement is a doozy too. But let me just play that again for you because it's not a resolution, but it is a resolution, at least for the moment, for the first movement. I'm finally getting warmed up, by the way. So we have. In C major rather than C minor. So that's the first movement. That's our first investigation into Opus 111. And I would invite you to come back next week while we explore the second movement. I will probably go through parts of the first movement again to refresh people's memories, or for new people that didn't hear this particular presentation. So I would like to open it up for questions or comments or whatever people have on their minds.